Good evening and welcome to Science Study Break. This is the last one for the fall semester, and I want you to have a great deal of pre-Halloween fun with the biomechanics of movie monsters. I'm Roxanne Bagutska, and I'm at the Life Science Library, and I'm one of the hosts of Science Study Break. One of the things I have to tell you, first of all, is the legalese. This is being video recorded, so by entering this room, we are going to record you and distribute images and sound throughout the universe without restriction. So be aware of that. The other thing you should be aware of is that since we are talking about the biomechanics of monster movies, we are talking about a certain genre that tends to lean toward the violent and the gory. And there will be scenes from movies that deserve their R ratings for various things such as harsh language, horrific images, fights, children in danger, dismemberments, and real estate and inhabitants stomped. So it may not be appropriate for those of tender sensibilities. Now I want to tell you a little bit. I was talking to Anne, our presenter this evening, about the research that she was doing, and she was telling me that she uses the database PubMed quite often, which made me happy because it's one of my favorite databases. And I just want to point out that if you are using this database, you should sign in with an account. And if you don't have one, then you can simply register for an account, fill in your information here and click register. And then when you log into PubMed, your account information will show up here so that the next thing you'll want to do is to set it up in such a way that you can not only do the search but see the full text results. So what you'll want to do is come to the outside tool information and scroll down until you find University of Texas Libraries, click the button, save it, and then it's going to show up here as your outside tool. And then you might also want to do something about the way that your results sets display in PubMed by changing it so that instead of just the citation, you get the whole abstract and you get them in reverse chronological order. Once you've saved that, go ahead and do your search, and you'll notice as you type in your terms, there's an auto-suggest for search terms. And then you get some information like this, and if you like an article, you can just click on the Find It at UT button to go out to the full text of the article in HTML, or if you prefer, you can look at it in the PDF. So that's the happy way to use PubMed and to get to the full text of articles. Now I want to tell you a little bit about Science Study Break. It's a UT Libraries program where we evaluate the presentations of science, technology, medicine, engineering, what have you, in popular movies and TV shows. And you can see that we have quite a pleasant history here in the past with several shows and several people who have come, like Ruth Buzzkirk came to talk about the Spider-Man movies. You can also see some of the ones that you may have missed in the past on the UT YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and search Science Study Break, you can see these past Science Study Break programs in the comfort and privacy of your own home. We're not the only cool science program around on campus. I really want to draw your attention to our good friends Science in the Pub. They meet every other Friday at 5 in the Cactus Cafe for a little beer, a little science talk. So if you're not old enough to drink beer, that's okay. You can still come to Science in the Pub and have a softer beverage. And next Friday, they'll have Jeff Jensen on computing life and death. So be sure to show up for Science in the Pub. Okay. So tonight's Science Study Break is about the biomechanics of movie monsters. And our presenter is Dr. Ann Silverman from Mechanical Engineering. Dr. Silverman got her bachelor's degree at Arizona State and her master's and PhD here at the University of Texas at Austin. She was a recipient of a National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship and was recognized by the Society of Women for Women Engineers as a 2010 Outstanding Graduate Collegiate Member. She serves as an editorial referee for the journals Gait and Posture, Journal of Biomechanics, and Journal of Rehabilitation Medicine, and she's now a researcher in Dr. Richard Neptune's Neuromuscular Biomechanics Lab with research that focuses on the analysis of human movement with an emphasis on identifying muscle compensation strategies in pathological populations, and she's going to tell you what that means. She works to understand the biomechanical consequences of using specific muscle compensations and to use this understanding to provide a quantitative basis for developing effective rehabilitation training programs. You're lucky to be getting this presentation from her tonight because in January, Dr. Silverman is going to join the mechanical engineering faculty at the Colorado School of Mines in Golden, Colorado. So please welcome Dr. Ann Silverman.
Hey, thank you all for coming, and thanks to Roxanne and her team for putting this all together. This is a lot of fun for me. I've been going to the science study breaks for a while, and I think they're a lot of fun. So it was a good stretch for me to think out of my graduate student box and start thinking about movie monsters. As Roxanne said, I just finished my PhD in the summertime in August, and I did my master's and PhD in Dr. Rick Neptune's lab in mechanical engineering. And I've really enjoyed my time here at UT. So I study biomechanics, and what that is the application of mechanical engineering principles to biological systems. And when I was in high school and in undergrad, I really, really liked biology, and I really, really liked physics. And so biomechanics is kind of perfect for me because it's putting those two subject areas together to understand the human body and how we move. There's a lot of different branches of biomechanics. For example, cellular biomechanics is looking at the structure of the cell. Joint biomechanics has to do with orthopedic implants and looking at tiny deformations in the cartilage, injuries at the joint. Cardiovascular biomechanics is looking at fluid flow through your arteries and veins, designing stents and learning how your heart works. And what I do is musculoskeletal biomechanics, which is how the whole body moves as a mechanical system, how our muscles and bones and joints work together to achieve a movement. And my specific project here at UT has had to do with people with amputations between their knee and their ankle. And they're missing part of their leg, they're missing the muscles down there, and so how do they compensate because of this change to their musculoskeletal system? How is their energy cost affected? How do the loads on their joints change, and how can we improve their overall mobility? So it's kind of a little background of my project. So you can answer a lot of questions with biomechanics, and we try to get at these in our lab in mechanical engineering. For example, just looking at muscle function, if you fire a muscle in your body, it can accelerate every single body segment. So what does each individual muscle do? We also look at designing equipment and devices. This picture in the middle here with the ankle is designed by someone in our lab. And it's addition to a traditional prosthetic foot that you can manufacture very easily and very cheaply in third world countries and improve the performance of a prosthetic foot. You can also look at rehabilitation, which is what I'm really interested in. So if someone has a specific impairment, how can we train them to overcome that impairment? We can also study and optimize athletic performance. There's a study that came out of our lab that looked at optimizing the shape of a chainring in cycling to maximize power output. And we found that a ellipsoid shape, the student in our lab, was better for elite athletes to maximize their power. There are a lot of different questions we can ask. Some examples up here, looking at surgical planning and why people fall, why we move the way we move. But that's a background on biomechanics in general and in our lab, but you are all here to learn about movie monsters, so we'll get to those.
There's only one creature capable of leaving a footprint that size. The abominable snowman. It's gotta be, what, 20, 25 feet? Slide.
Okay, so that first clip showed his footprint, and the second clip showed sort of the size of King Kong. And one of the main concepts that seems to apply to all these different movie monsters is looking at being the right size. There's a historical essay from 1928 from John Haldane that talks about how as you increase in mass, you increase your volume and therefore your mass with the cube of that increase. So if you look at this diagram here, you see we have a unit length and then an area with that unit length as the dimensions, and then the volume of that unit length. And if we double the length, we actually quadruple the area, and we multiply the volume times 8. So there's this huge difference for a same scale of an object in the mass, even if the length isn't all that different. So looking at his foot size, I guessed it to be about 4 feet based on that clip. And looking at the scale of a gorilla, a regular sized gorilla, that means that King Kong is probably about 24 feet, which is what the actor suggested that he might be. So that seems somewhat reasonable. If we look at his weight, he goes up to 23,000 pounds. And in general, gorillas eat about 1/8 of their weight in food a day. And so that means that King Kong has to eat 3,000 pounds of food, which is a lot of food. When I was researching a little bit about this, this mass estimate that I have is probably a little bit low. I think he looks to be about 25 feet tall when he's in a crouched position. And so some people are saying, oh, he's even, as opposed to 4 feet, 4 times taller, he's actually more like 7 times taller, in which case he would be almost 60 tons. So King Kong is very big, and he would have to eat a lot of food, and it's hard to imagine eating that much food per day. So he probably couldn't exist. For a creature that big, and there's a researcher, John Hutchinson, at the Royal Veterinary College that looks a lot at the biomechanics of animals, of large animals. And as you get bigger, like I said a few slides ago, your volume and your mass varies with the cube of your increase in height. And you need a lot more muscle mass to accelerate that big body mass around. And so if King Kong is 11 to 60 tons, he might be able to stand up and shuffle around. But the forces on the musculoskeletal system, if he were bounding around and jumping as he is all throughout the movie, would likely crush his bones. So he maybe could exist, but wouldn't move in the same way. And the other point I kind of wanted to make here is that in general, we look at this, animals don't move very quickly once they get bigger. If you think about an elephant, it's a pretty slow-moving animal. And the elephants rely a lot on their skeletal system. They lock their joints and just rest on their bones, as opposed to a cat or a frog, which is in a very crouched position that can move very quickly. So let's go on to our next clip. Okay. So T-Rex, that's who he was fighting, several T-Rexes, was approximately 12 feet tall, and during the battle scene, it looked as if T-Rex and King Kong were similar sizes, so that's probably an exaggeration from the movie. T-Rex should be a little bit smaller relative to King Kong, as our estimate was around 25 feet tall for King Kong. What's interesting about T-Rex is John Hutchinson, the researcher I mentioned earlier that looks at the biomechanics of large animals, has done a really interesting study published in Nature about the biomechanics of T-Rex based on the fossil record. And based on where the center of mass location of this dinosaur is, you can see he kind of almost looks like a chicken. His center of mass is really high, and he's got those short little legs. His top running speed is about 10 to 15 miles per hour, which is on the order of very elite athletes sprinting. So in Jurassic Park, there's that scene where T-Rex is chasing a Jeep, and the Jeep is supposedly going at 40 miles an hour, and T-Rex would definitely not be able to keep up with that Jeep. So it's an interesting application of biomechanics. The other thing, I think I even heard a couple people laughing about it, is the brachiation in that scene. So that's swinging from the tree limbs down the gorge. I think it's pretty clear that those vines would snap under the weight of 3 T-Rexes and King Kong. But they seem to be just fine sitting in there like a little swing. So tendons and ligaments rupture at 60 and 20 megapascals respectively. That measure megapascals is a measure of stress, which is sigma down there in the lower right, which is force over area. So if you have a really big area and a small force, you're not going to fail. But as you get that area smaller and smaller with that same size force, your tendons and ligaments will break. And so with King Kong swinging from those branches with one arm, and he's got that really big heavy mass, I did the calculation, and it seems like with my pretty low estimate of 11 tons, we're right around the maybe he could do it, maybe he couldn't do it range. But for those higher estimates of 60 tons, he would probably have a rotator cuff injury, which would happen before the bones broke, but probably vastly after when the actual branches would break. So any comments, thoughts about King Kong before we move on to Godzilla?
I guess the thing that always strikes me watching this is you know, the character, the Ann Darrow character should be like
Squished.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. I mean, he's being very careful, maybe not, but it does seem like if you're battling with 3 T-Rexes and grabbing your love interest, you might not be as careful.
Monster the Japanese call Godzilla has just walked out of Tokyo Bay. He's as tall as a 30-story building. And now he's making his way toward the city's main line of defense. 300,000 volts of electricity strung around the city is a barrier against Godzilla. Tokyo has no defense.
Okay, so he mentioned there is an electric fence surrounding the city that is 300,000 volts. Now, an electric chair for a human to kill a human uses about 2,000 volts. And we know that voltage is equal to current times resistance. And so the amount of current it requires to kill a human is very small. It's on the order of milliamps. And so our resistance, our biological stuff, our resistance is very high. And so resistance is a function, the second equation there, of rho is resistivity, which is a property of the material. So metals have a very low resistivity. Insulation would have a high resistivity. And then we have that multiplied by length over area. So really long wires have a higher resistance than short ones, and really fat wires have a smaller resistance than skinny ones. So if we assume that Godzilla is made out of the same biological stuff as a human, so it has the same resistivity, we find out that the resistance of Godzilla is 1/60th of that of a human because he's so wide. That might even actually be kind of high. I'm assuming he's the same dimensions of a human, and he seems to me a little bit wider than he is tall compared to the scale of a human if you had a human that size. So actually, because Godzilla is so wide, his resistance is much lower than that of a human. So he would definitely be killed with 2,000 volts, much less 300,000 volts. So in the movie, he didn't seem to have any problem just going straight on into the city, but that would most definitely bring him down. So one thing I forgot to mention from the first clip is that you see Godzilla is moving very slow, which is actually a little more realistic. I mentioned that a little bit with King Kong. I think Godzilla is about 300 feet tall, and so he would absolutely crush under the weight of his own body. But when you're jumping and bounding around, those forces on your skeletal system are many times more. So it's good that he's walking slow. And so in a way, the 1950s, 60s version of Godzilla is more realistic than our 2005 King Kong movie. But he's moving very slow, and he's on this bridge. And I don't know very much about bridges. I'm sure there might be a couple civil engineers in the audience. But looking at the Golden Gate Bridge, which is a suspension bridge, not a stone arch bridge like was shown in the video, has a maximum capacity of 2 tons per linear foot, and a ton is 2,000 pounds. And Godzilla is 18,000 tons. So for Godzilla to not crush a bridge that has this capacity rating, it would have to be 9,000 feet long for a static load of him just standing on it as opposed to stomping on it like he did. And the bridge in the movie was definitely not that long. So you saw it vibrate, but I think it would absolutely crush as soon as he stomped his foot on it. Okay, so this clip shows Godzilla walking along the seafloor, which is probably unrealistic, because none of us would walk along the seafloor. There's a reason we don't walk when we're underwater. There's a reason we swim. And that's largely due to the force of drag of the fluid that we're moving through. So the drag force from the water is proportional to the area. So it behooves you to make that area that's perpendicular to your direction of travel as small as possible, which is why we swim with only our head facing forward as opposed to our entire body. That's not very efficient. So Godzilla would move a lot faster if he also employed this technique. It's likely that they don't make him do this because this is a very old movie and they don't really have the technology to show him swimming. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually going to comment in the interest of like credit where credit is due. In the newer Godzilla movies, what they usually do is they actually have him, like sort of have him floating on the surface. When he's on the surface, it's really just a guy walking in a pool, but you know, they try their best.
Mm-hmm.
Then they've actually sort of done more scenes where they're shooting him underwater and they do like, they CG him so he's swimming more like a whale or an alligator.
Great, yeah. So my guess is that this movie is just a little too old for them. You know, it's a guy in a suit, so what else can he do but walk? But as these movies progress, then maybe they make him a little more realistic. The other thing this clip showed was that Godzilla was sinking, and both that's related to the buoyant force, which is the buoyant force is equal to the weight of the displaced fluid of the ocean that he's sinking into. So humans and alligators both have a density that is very close to water, and it can fluctuate based on how much air is in our lungs. So as I'm sure all of you know, when you go swimming, you can float pretty easily, or you can also make yourself sink by expiring all that air. And I would assume that Godzilla has a similar density to water as well. So if he's more dense than water, which would be if he expired his air, he would sink just fine. And if he was holding his breath, he would probably float like we do. So I'd say that's pretty realistic. Okay, any other Godzilla comments? He's a pretty fun monster. Okay. So this was from the movie The Host. I'm not sure even how to pronounce it. It seems like they have a lot of names for this monster. Guimel, the dolphin monster. So looking at the way this monster moves, it seems like they were really trying to combine land and sea animals, and they sort of didn't do a good job of either. What struck me is that the monster's tail is really more like a lizard than a fish, which is kind of strange for swimming, similar to the reason that Godzilla doesn't walk across the seafloor. But when you're a fish, you want a big, broad tail so you have a greater area to push against the fluid and propel yourself forward. So he has this long tail, but it doesn't seem like it would be advantageous in swimming and doesn't seem to do a whole lot. This monster also has those muscular limbs, but they are pretty small. And if it's a water monster, he probably doesn't need those limbs. Fish have their muscles in their body to move against the force of the water, as opposed to supporting their body. Because of the buoyant force, they don't need to resist gravity. So we can have these huge whales and not worry about supporting that huge mass. So it's pretty unlikely that a water monster would have those muscular limbs. And for him to move that quickly, you could see he was outrunning all of the people. He would probably have to have much more muscular limbs to move that big body mass around.
God.
Bishop, you did okay.
I did.
Oh yeah. from her, you bitch!
I'm going to play the Cloverfield clips as well. So the alien queen, she looks kind of like a large bug, but you can tell there's definitely vertebrae there. The same concept that keeps coming up, she's very big. She has a lot of mass. She looks kind of like a skeleton to me. I don't know where her muscles are, and she would really need big muscles in order to move around like she does. She's also often in a crouched position, leaning forward, which I'm sure you can all relate, that you could stand up straight for hours and hours, but as soon as you bend your knees and squat, all your muscles activate, and that can be very tiring. So she might have some super strong skeleton made out of alien material, and so I think her overall size and skeletal system is reasonable, but I don't know where the muscles are. The other thing I wanted to point out is just she's often leaning forward, and she has this really long tail, which is a good thing because she needs to maintain her balance and not fall over, especially when she's doing these rapid movements. So when we're talking about stability, Alexander Hoff has a paper that identifies dynamic stability. So what this basically means is that your center of mass needs to be within your base of support when you're standing still. So if you're standing on one leg, that's what this model is in the lower right, an inverted pendulum model. That mass can move back and forth, but only as far as your base of support is. And then when you're crouching and jumping around, your velocity also comes into play. So you can't deviate too much. And so the queen's long tail causes her center of mass to actually be more concentrated by her legs. So that's a very good thing for her, not for Sigourney Weaver. Similar idea with Clovey. This monster seems to be really top heavy to me. And I think in the extras for this film, the designers of the creature say that this monster should be able to walk on 2 legs, but I don't really see that happening. And as you saw from the clips moving around, the monster really does sort of ambulate on the 4 different legs. When you have those 4 legs, you have a much wider base of support. And so therefore, the center of mass can deviate through a greater distance. And so that helps Clovey maintain balance. And the last thing I want to talk about, well, any monster comments, ideas? Okay. Yeah?
So I figure out that in calculations you need to consider the density of the air and the gravity of the place.
Mm-hmm.
So with such a monster, so obviously the calculation for the mass and the mechanics of the limbs probably change with the planets. So,
Mm-hmm.
but if you were to bring such big-sized animals like how they show in Avatar to Earth, would the gravity of Earth now affect their biomechanics?
Definitely. And I think you can kind of think of that similar to just on Earth between air and water. So gravity isn't so much a problem in water. So we're able to have these whales that are the size of ships, and they move a lot differently than they would on land. For the Alien movie, obviously Sigourney Weaver and the little girl are walking around just fine, so I would assume that's similar to Earth. But yes, I mean, most of my comments are all based on the weight of the creature, and if you have a smaller gravitational force, that's not going to be as big of an issue. Yeah?
I just wanted to bring up a comment. You were talking about the clone, I believe it was,
Mm-hmm.
the Japanese movie.
Yeah.
And you were saying that sea creatures wouldn't necessarily, need limbs or long tails. I just wanted to bring up the Galapagos iguana,
Okay.
which is actually an excellent swimmer.
Really? Okay.
I'm not saying I'm 100% happy with the gait the way that I see it
Yeah.
presented in there. It seemed to be galloped more than like a monitor lizard type gait.
Mm-hmm.
But just as a random comment.
Oh, definitely.
You might look at the Galapagos iguana because
Mm-hmm.
they are very comfortable in water.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point. I don't know about that iguana, so there's definitely options there. I would imagine it's relatively small, though, and not nearly as big as the movie monster, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. So I think the take-home message from all these monsters is just how big they are, and that's why we don't have big monsters here on Earth. Any other comments? Oh, yeah.
One thing I actually expected you to bring up about Cloverfield, given your choice of clip, is the fact that unlike most giant monster movies, that creature actually had to jump many times its own height in that scene in order to hit the helicopter,
Mm-hmm.
which is sort of bad enough even jumping at all from that howling essay, what they say,
Right.
elephant falls down a mine shaft and splashes, as opposed to a mouse will just walk away.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, giant monster movies are giant monster movies, but I was sort of especially egregious, especially considering that it's got skinny little limbs for its size.
Mm-hmm. Great point. So several times its height, big massive monster, gonna splatter. Mm-hmm.
In the aliens clip, we cut off right before because it doesn't involve the actual alien per se, but Sigourney Weaver is like holding on to a ladder rung with her arm, and the alien and the whole mech suit is hanging off that. I wonder if her joint just.
I would imagine she has a shoulder dislocation after that one.
Just double check.
Yeah.
Sigourney Weaver's tough though. So.
She is pretty tough. I would want her around if I were meeting the alien. So. Mm-hmm.
The robot, the monster, in the previous one, she was saving her child from the monster.
Uh-huh.
Was it in space or on Earth?
I believe it's
It's in a terraformed land.
right.
So maybe theoretical effects. So maybe.
Well, you would think maybe it wouldn't, but given the fact that Sigourney Weaver and her child are walking around just fine. I mean, it looks like Earth. So even though it's a ship, they probably have some sort of gravitational field generator, some explanation for why they're not floating through. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is related to movie monsters, but is also related to the research we do here at UT, which is motion capture. So to make the movie monsters move realistically in a movie, the movie companies use the same sort of equipment and technology that we use in the lab in order to assess how impaired populations might be moving differently from non-impaired populations.
Challenge Baby Joe.
I only bet on what's dearest to a man's heart, else there's no way to tell if he's bluffing. What a man is willing to risk or not to risk, that's a measure of his soul.
I think it's important to create the same.
I think the thing that people need to keep very strongly in mind is that this is not an animated film. These actors did not just stand at a lectern and do a voice part, and then animators went off for the next 2 years and created the entire physicality of their performance.
The most exciting thing is, it is my performance. This thing walks and talks and acts like me. It's my interpretation.
Every nuance, every tiny bit of the performance that you see on the screen was created by the actors. They had to run, they had to leap, they had to fight, they had to do all the things that you see them doing in the film. And that's where the power of the performance comes from.
It's not just we're capturing motion, we're trying to capture what's the intent of the actor.
What CGI technology does is it replaces prosthetics. Actors can now play any character that's designed in the computer without going through hours and hours of makeup. And what we get is their performance coming through the CGI character. Just like you would get Eric Stoltz's performance coming through in The Mask. You get Zoe Saldana's performance coming through in A2.
You have a strong heart. No fear. But stupid. Ignorant like a child.
Performance capture is a technique where you try to capture the performance of an actor and translate it to a digital character.
Prior to them even moving on to the performance capture world, we with the actors inside this giant sphere covered with lights, and we could photograph them, study their facial features, and try to understand how to design their characters.
This is great. And then you put an actor in a suit with markers on the suit.
We put you in a spatial volume.
Using a lot of cameras all around to record the motions of all the markers.
The computer is creating a real-time moving skeleton of you. From that skeleton, you now can drive a computer-generated character.
Performance capture is great for anything that can really be done by a human performer, including a lot of stunt work. Even some of the creatures on this film are at least roughed out in performance capture stage. Jim was working with some of the performers to work out creature movements, in a sense kind of puppeteering.
We use the volume for everything, for the aerial scene.
Okay. So you saw from those clips and also these pictures right here that there are these reflective markers on the actors, and they can look at how the body moves in order to recreate and enhance that digitally. So in the lab, when we're doing research, we use the same markers and similar cameras, and we put the markers on the skin, or you can see this man is swinging a golf club. There's some markers on the golf club. And the camera has near infrared light, and it shoots the light at the marker. And the markers, they're covered with the same sort of reflective tape that would be on your athletic shoes. So that's kind of like tiny ping pong balls with that reflective tape on them. And the position of the marker is measured in 3D space. And then within the computer program, we can say, okay, this particular marker is attached to the thigh segment or the foot segment, and we can get joint angles from this data, or the movement of the golf club. And so one of the things in the Pirates clip, you saw the actors had on suits and the markers were on top of the clothing, which is probably good enough for the movies, but that's actually really a big no-no when you're talking about clinical research, just because your clothes can move so much relative to your body. And we want to capture the motion of the bones themselves through this technique. These pictures I show you here, these markers are just taped onto the skin with double-sided tape, really strong double-sided tape. But there are certain studies out there where people have actually agreed to put pins in their bones so that with the marker attached to the end. So very few and far between, but just like your clothes can move relative to your body, your skin can move a lot relative to your bones. So that's a way to sort of get away from the noise of the measurement. So you can see here these graphs I have at the bottom are your hip, knee, and ankle angle during walking, very stereotypical patterns. You can see one of my amputees is in the middle there. And so here's a video of one of the trials. On the left, this is just the regular video of a subject we have walking across the lab. And then on the right is the video of the trial that really highlights the marker positions. The butterfly pattern you see is the trajectory of the force on the ground. So you'll see those plates in the frame where the subjects are stepping, and those plates can let us know what force they're putting on the ground on each foot. Are they asymmetric? And we can measure those forces. And that also helps us to know the forces at the joints, the moments about the joints. So we use similar technology, but a little different approach. And I think more and more the movies are focusing on the facial expressions. That was really a big deal for Avatar and for Pirates as well with Davy Jones. And I personally have never put markers on the face because I'm interested in what the legs are doing. But you can get some really detailed motion of all the different aspects of your expressions. And that's all I had. So. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Or training the person how to walk better? All of the above. This type of technology we use to measure how they're walking, and whether we're testing different types of prosthetic feet or the same prosthetic foot but different walking speeds or inclines, declines, just how they respond to rehab pre and post. There's a lot of different questions you can look at. Any other questions?
Don't leave quite yet. I have a couple of housekeeping things here. Okay. A couple of housekeeping notes. Let's see. Okay. Everything that we saw today, all the movies that we saw, you can find these on DVD through the UT libraries. Well, they will be available when I turn them in. But you can look at all of these movies from the UT libraries. I want to thank Nancy Elder